Kamala Harris was on a podcast recently with former NBAer Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes.
Were they smoking?
No, that was smoking. What do you mean? I think she. Oh, you mean like Token?
Token.
Yeah, I mean, I think she does that with Charlemagne the God in New York, but not with these two gentlemen. Steven Jackson was a very good NBA player, actually. Anyway, I digress. They were talking, or they asked her the same question that she was asked actually in the debate about, you got a plan to make things a little bit better for people struggling economically?
Going from a show to a whole entire company, what is your economic plan moving forward for people who are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling for groceries and rent and homeowners?
So, look, I grew up
in a middle-class household.
My sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a child care center.
Uh-huh.
That child care center was actually owned by a woman who lived 2 doors down from us, Mrs. Shelton, who was
good Mrs.
all
Shelton.
of our
Yeah,
accounts and feelings.
Sounds like an episode of 227.
It was so middle-class
And she was a
American
small
that
business
she
owner.
said
So I
bonjour to
started with a
everyone
small
she
business
knew.
and graduated.
Yeah. Anyway, she ultimately got to. She took about the same time and the same circuitous path to get to
Bonjour,
talking about
madame.
some child tax credits and the like. For more on the economics, the economic offerings of the two presidential candidates, as well as that September jobs number. Oh, eye-popping. 254,000 jobs. I don't know if that's good news or bad news to Jay Powell. Jim Perry joins us, founder, CIO of Perry International Capital Partners. James, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning.
Are you still across the pond in England?
Yes, I am in Geneva, Switzerland.
Oh, you're in Geneva now. You're moving around.
Yeah.
So-
There's mountains here.
Yeah, I've heard.
What are we to make of the jobs number? Is it crushing? Is it the greatest jobs number? Or like other jobs numbers, will it be revised down?
Oh, you're such a, I don't know, skeptic or something. The job situation in the United States is a mess, always has been. Dan and I have talked about this a lot.
I've heard
The
you.
Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't even know how many people in the country are working, let alone the number of people that got new jobs. So we take every one of these monthly numbers with a huge grain of salt and recognize that it'll be revised downward after the election probably. And the fact is that the number one driver of new jobs is the government.
So how does the street react to that number after a 50 basis point rate cut?
Well, I've been watching the market here since really sort of the Fed cut, and interest rates are going up really in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, boy.
10-year treasuries are over 380 again. They were down to 360, so it's not a big move, but it's a message, right? And I think that the message from the markets, Dan, is that at least half the market believes that the Fed shouldn't have cut, right? I think that GDP is probably going to come in better than expected. And you and I have talked about this, right? Third quarter GDP, we were talking about this back in May and June. I figured it'd probably come in about 3% or more. And Q4 is usually a stronger GDP number than Q3 because of the Christmas selling season. So I think GDP is probably stronger than most people think. And I think inflation's higher than most people think. And I think Powell cut rates because he's deathly afraid that somehow there's going to be a recession and he's going to be responsible for it. And his legacy will be destroyed or something.
So inflation is higher than people think, and interest rates are higher than people think. But as long as Jay Powell is turning the dials in the direction that Wall Street wants, the markets will continue to perform productively, positively, and people will muddle through. That's the essential assessment.
You bet. That's the plan, man. I mean, the fact is that I've been talking to clients this week, and, money's been flowing into the United States really since the Fed started printing money en masse after the great financial crisis in 2010, and they've accelerated it since the pandemic. So global investors are not stupid. The dollar's been very strong because money flows into the United States from Latin America and from the Middle East and from Europe and from Asia remain very strong. And the reason they are is that the longer the Fed continues to provide liquidity to the financial system, that means that you're leveraging up the asset base of the United States economy. And there's very few regions in the world that are doing that as effectively as the United States.
The dollar's strong because we're devaluing our currency slower than other countries are devaluing theirs?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look at all this stuff that's going on in China, I just saw this morning in the FT that debt to GDP in China is something like 383%. And the debt to GDP ratio in Japan is over 300%, right? Ours is 120. So, yeah, compared to what's going on in the money printing in Asia, we look darn right austere.
The proposals from both candidates, without going chapter and verse, what is the most attractive to you about what is being said by either of the candidates, and what is the most dangerous for free market capitalism and, by extension, economic opportunity and growth?
I'm glad you asked. So few people do. I think if you look at the two candidates and the election, if you are remotely an economic thinker, you have to think about growth and economic expansion, and that's going to happen under one candidate, and he's on the right. And on the left, you will expect, I would suspect, the continuation of the last 3.5 years, which is spend as much as you can as a government, expanding government services, and putting money into the least productive sector of the economy, which means that the stock market probably will do worse under the current administration if applied to the next 4 years. And if Trump can cut taxes at the corporate level, which I'm not sure he can, and I'm not sure that that's really going to help the budget deficit because, we brought in $5 trillion last year and spent $7 trillion, so there's a $2 trillion deficit. But of that $5 trillion that we brought in, only 10% of it is corporate taxes. So it really doesn't make much of a difference if you go from 21 to 15 or from 21 to 28. You're talking about a rounding number of a couple of tens of billions of dollars. But the fact is that corporations, if given a choice, it's like going to the gas station. If you see a gas station where gas is $4.20 and down around the block, around the corner, it's $3.90, where are you going to go, right? You're going to go to the lowest place. So I think that if taxes come down from 21% to 15% under Trump, more corporations will stay here, more jobs will be created, and the economy should do better.
What's your reaction to, both parties are essentially taking, mercantilist positions, both candidates are, with respect to trade. You had Trump a couple of weeks ago essentially threaten John Deere with tariffs if they move a production facility to Mexico, something he's done before. In addition to, generally speaking, calling for tariffs across the board against imports in particular sectors, at least, or from particular countries, at least. And the Biden administration has been effectively on board with that, and Kamala wants to take it, one step further when it comes to those sorts of neo-mercantilist policies. So your reaction to that and how potentially damaging that approach could be?
The trade tariff story and global trade with respect to prices and inflation and growth is a lot more complicated than you hear on some of the news programs and on TV stations. But I think that if you can try to boil it down, I think the Trump tariffs against China have been extended under the Biden administration, so they recognize that they were probably a fairly decent idea. Now, the idea that they're going to make them worse is probably not going to happen because they're globalists and they want to kind of appease China and other countries around the world. But Trump has been blamed for thinking about raising taxes. That means that that's going to be a 20% tax on households because prices are going to go up. And that's a very lazy way to describe what's going on here. I think the Trump increase in tariffs against China are designed to do one thing, Dan, and that is to level the playing field against an economy that is aggressively waging economic warfare against the West, not only the U.S., but Russia, or Europe as well. And the fact is, you've got a Communist Party that's subsidizing the entire Chinese manufacturing export machine, and Trump wants to give it a body blow.
But extending beyond China to places like Canada, when you slap tariffs on Canadian lumber, and then and then at the same time you're complaining about the median cost of a home.
Yeah, I think that's more sort of populist stuff than anything else, to be honest with you. I mean, Canada's our neighbor. It's the longest unsecured border on the planet, And the fact is, our number one import from Canada is crude oil from the shale oil fields of the Rockies. And the number one export to Canada from the United States is refined gasoline. So everything else is a mere, bag of shells. The fact is that Canada is a good country. The lumber situation isn't really going to affect the housing market in terms of prices. The thing that affects housing prices is regulation. I saw these guys in New Jersey were talking about trying to build new houses, and they said more than 50% of the cost of building a new home is regulation.
Yeah.
So quite honestly, the lumber issue is kind of a,
well,
whatever.
just as an example of extending tariffs, maybe, as you say, for populist political reasons, but not really for sound economic ones. So the other thing though with with respect to Trump, and Vance addressed this intermittently during the debate on Tuesday night, and it's energy policy. And once he got past, being more concerned about solar panels being constructed in China versus the United States, as opposed to being concerned about $1.5 trillion Green New Deal crony capitalist gambit. Once he got past that and talked about energy production, I thought he was hitting the mark a little bit more squarely. And so my question to you is, in terms of getting past tax and regulatory policy, not to dismiss them, but in terms of what America can do to really rev up the engine here, is the domestic energy production, essentially doing just about a 180 reversal from the Biden years on energy production domestically. Is that the best thing Trump could do in terms of freeing an industry to help America become energy independent again?
Yes, I suppose you could argue that. And I think, again, it's kind of a populist sort of rallying point. But as was pointed out to me in an earlier message from a group of economists and more liberal-leaning investment managers here in Geneva, and it is true that energy production in the States is actually slightly higher now than it was 3.5 years ago. Now, you don't hear that very much from the Republican side, but the fact is that it's still awfully expensive to transport things like natural gas around the country and to get regulations to drill and frack and drill in the Gulf of Mexico and things like that. And I would say from an economic standpoint, from a macroeconomic standpoint, the best thing that the Republican Party can do, Trump and J.D. Vance, is argue the case that if regulations go down in the oil and gas industry, the price of oil and gas will fall. And quite honestly, there is so much natural gas in the United States, we could probably power the economy for 100 years. But the fact is, it's still very expensive compared to the rest of the world. And I think if they keep pounding the story on deregulation and increased productions, my thought, Dan, isn't so much that the prices are where they are right now, but where they could be in another 18 months, right? What's wrong with a $2 a gallon of oil?
Well, that's what I mean.
Right.
Well, that's
or
a yes.
One.
Well, but that's a yes.
Yeah, or one.
But that's a yes to unleash the productivity of America's energy sector.
100%. It reduces the cost of doing every single business, including delivering stone crabs to Joe's Stone Crab in Miami. Most of the prices of stone crabs have doubled because energy prices and wages. It's not about the good, it's about the service, right? So service prices around the country will fall with a more aggressive deregulatory oil and gas policy.
Well, and you're exactly right to point out the stone crab prices, because I'm much more concerned about that than gas, and I'm sick of paying top dollar for stone crab at Joe's. So I appreciate that.
$138 an order for a starter.
You don't have to,
70 before.
You don't have to tell me. You know,
pandemic.
The people don't know the suffering that we endure, Jim. I mean,
it's a nightmare.
Exactly.
Just take the one claw and let it go back into the ocean, for God's sake.
Jim Perry, founder, CIO, Perry International Capital Partners. James, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Have a good weekend. Thanks, guys.
Adios.
See, the hills are alive with the sound of music. That's Salzburg, but he's in Geneva. But they could be alive in Geneva, too. Jim joined us on the Turnkey Depot Answer Line.
Opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies supplements, changing the world one life at a time.
I'm a 70-year-old man. I'm not a young guy, and I'm an ex-athlete. Well, yeah, when I was taking it, I recognized that I was feeling better. You know what I'm saying? And just mentally knowing is important also.
I am a customer of you guys. I love your product. Love it, love it. Nothing but good things to say about your product. I love it. And as long as y'all don't sell it, I'm going to take it as long as I can.